percent of everything.
Okay, so the accusation is you insincerely, you acted in ill faith. You framed a debate between me and Adnan at the halfway point to make me look like I was the loser, which is fine, that's your channel, you can do what you want. Adnan brought a number of points. Wait, can you... Oh, tell him hi. Tell him hi to me, yes. Sorry. Adnan made a number of points where he brought a number of sources, Jewish sources, and you call Adnan a historian.
No, he's qualified.
Oh, he's qualified as a historian. Right. He brought a number of sources. I went home and researched those sources, and none of them existed. Now it could simply be.
So why don't you go speak to Adnan?
So before you run away, and push me over to Adnan.
No. These were his arguments.
So then that's fine, and that's fine. I'm not. My issue is Adnan could have just literally said the wrong. Listen. Adnan could have literally used the wrong word. He doesn't speak Hebrew, he speaks Arabic. So he could have mispronounced something. So I put up questions in good faith.
What were the questions? You can tell the people.
The questions for the camera were, I looked everywhere on the internet. I looked everywhere in my library. I spoke to rabbis, and I couldn't find any of the sources that Adnan had proved as proof.
He quoted Bernard Lewis.
Bernard Lewis exists. What I couldn't find were the Jewish sources.
Which ones?
So Petrus, I've forgotten the name.
But you said all here. But from my recollection,
so there were two sources that he brought.
He mentioned about 4 secondary source materials.
Okay, it's fine. I put the question for each one.
By the way, can I say something? Sorry. Just once again, this is Adnan's argument. Exactly. But he actually has left the bibliography, from my knowledge. Shall I show it to you?
That's perfect. Yeah.
So I can show it to you because I think.
But just before we get there, my issue with you, Muhammad, was I put these questions up, gave the viewers the context of the debate, and you deleted it.
Wait, hold on.
And then you just swore on Allah. You said, Wallahi, that you didn't delete it.
No, I didn't say that. I said, Wallahi, I can't remember.
But you can remember, because when I approached you,
what do you mean I can't remember? How can you tell me what I remember?
Because when I approached you, you named the debate. You said it was the debate between Adnan. I could have commented on any of your videos, yet you started talking about...
Joseph.
Yet you started, funny man. Yet you...
No. What's the title of his debate? Jewish. He left the whole bibliography there, man. Adnan Rashid, Jewish.
Petrus Ephron was one of the sources I couldn't find anywhere.
Yeah, all right, let me get it for you, right? I've got it here for you, bro.
Are you British?
He left it, he actually gave a bibliography, right? Okay, alright, here we go. He says, this was with the one with, I think Bob the Builder, but a lot of the things came up with your one, right? So as you can see here, Adnan Rashid left a whole bibliography.
Okay, that's with someone else. I'm talking about the debate I had with him.
Very similar sources.
Okay, Petrus Ephron, does it exist there?
No, but I was a bit inspired.
Petrus Ephron, does it exist in that bibliography? Okay, fine. The point is you deleted it. That's the point.
Oh man, if I deleted it, I can't remember that.
The point is the Dawah teams, the Dawah guys like yourself, you're not interested in truth. You're not interested in sincere debate.
Exactly like the other fellow.
Petrus Ephron.
All the things.
I don't say it there anywhere.
Bernard Lewis.
Bernard Lewis is a modern author.
Yeah, secondary source material, yeah?
Something you saw before.
I want primary source, that's what I was dealing with.
Okay, look,
Can you move this on? There's a camera there.
I saw different things.
I know, I'm really racist.
In my mind,
You're right.
there is no other thing like this. But this might look similar to some other things.
I have my brother, he looks like you, exactly like you.
So my main issue with my main issue is the insincerity. You come across as if someone who's interested in truth.
Let's pretend I'm insincere. What does that got to do with anything?
It's got to do with everything. You come here if it's
I'm
proved.
insincere. I'm a hypocrite. Let's pretend.
You're a monarchic then. Yeah, you're a monarchic.
Let's pretend I'm a hypocrite. So that's called an ad hominem. So if they pretend I'm a hypocrite, it doesn't mean if a hypocrite says 2 + 2 = 4, that means it's wrong.
But it does put a huge question on everything that comes out of you and your channel.
Because you could be a hypocrite truth teller. Is that wrong?
Is that what you are? You're a hypocrite truth teller?
Yeah, maybe I am. It's alright. Say for the sake of argument, so this is the thing now, is where it becomes an ad hominem attack. So no longer is it about the arguments, but it's about the personality. Let's say I'm a bad guy. All right, I'm a bad guy that speaks the truth. That's how it is. If I'm a bad guy that speaks the truth, I don't have a problem with that.
You don't have a problem with being a bad
guy that speaks the truth.
Perfect. What about, and that's the issue, the truth is the primary thing here, because that's what we're debating.
Anything else you want to say? I mean, is that all you have to say?
Michael Innes refuses
The truth is everything, and you've just proven to yourself,
they want-
and you admitted to yourself. You literally said, Wallahi, I don't remember, when you clearly remembered.
How do you know I remember?
They killed.
Because you named the debate.
No, I don't
I could
remember.
have left a comment on any of the videos on your channel.
You asked me, do you remember doing the comment? I said, well, I can't remember. So that's what I said, wallahi about.
Do you remember that I posted a comment on your channel?
Well, I can't remember. I'm not the only person who's in charge of my YouTube channel. There's a few other people. And I can't remember. And even if you did,
It's in the public. Muhammed Hijab is a public figure who seeks to propagate truth. He comes here to express a message, spread a message of haqq, of truth. Yeah, that's why you're here.
I hope
yeah,
so,
this puts a huge question over everything.
Because I deleted your comment.
And you don't remember it. And you don't remember it.
I mean, Joseph, this seems a bit desperate, man. Are you being serious right now?
You liar, man. How come
Is that
you...
it?
So if somebody
got anything-
refutes one of, basically the whole thing, the whole premise.
never lied.
What's going on here, man?
You've never lied. You've never lied.
It's not to do with lying.
Joseph, is it looking a bit like you're clutching at straws a little bit? It's a bit desperate.
It's not a religious disagreement. Basically, the premise is, I
What's the
question.
premise? There's no argument being made. You're just saying I'm a hypocrite.
I'm saying,
okay.
Yeah, I think he said,
I
he
concede.
said something.
No problem. I'm a
No,
bad
he's saying
man.
he did not say.
Okay.
If that makes sense.
How does
I
that
think
make?
that's what the debate
I'm bad doesn't make Islam not true. I'm here to speak about Islam being true.
Then why would you remove comments that put questions on it? Why would you hide?
That debate was not even about Islam. It was about.
It was
Jewish-
about the treatment of Jews under Islam.
Okay. I didn't remove any comment from what I remember. How do we know you left the comment? I don't know, man.
No, I got a screenshot of it.
You can send it to me, man. You can put it up. Okay, look, Joseph, no problem. Say whatever you wanted to say on that comment. Say it now. I'm giving you an opportunity.
Okay, so very, very simple. None of the sources that Adnan
Okay,
Rashid
so what?
brought.
Yeah, could you send
exist.
it? Can you say that to Adnan Rashid?
Yeah, you can bring him here. We go.
Okay.
All three of us can have the conversation.
No, I don't need to. When he's there and he's researched this mas'ala, this issue, then you should speak to him about it, not me. I don't know why you've avoided him and come to me.
No,
And that's-
come to you because
why you
he
avoided
didn't
me.
delete the comment. He will happily have an intellectual argument and doesn't need to hide challenges.
Okay,
He doesn't.
no
He's
problem.
not afraid. From my understanding
Yes.
of Adnan, when I've debated him, he's not afraid of difficult
So
questions.
why are
He
you
doesn't
afraid of
hide
him? Why are you
I'm
not go to him and ask him
No,
about
I'm
his
asking you because he didn't delete the comment to hide from his viewers
challenge that you
who
put
challenged.
forward?
What was the
The
problem?
challenge was that none of the sources existed. I spoke to rabbis, I looked in my own library, I checked the internet. None of the sources that Adnan brought existed. I put this as questions on his channel, and he
You're
removed.
talking about primary sources.
Yeah, none of the primary sources
Which
exist.
you
Bernard
only
Lewis
mentioned, you only
exists.
mentioned one, by the way.
So unfortunately, I can't remember the other two.
You can't remember?
Yeah, that's fine. That's fine. I can remember one of them.
So you were just saying, you were just attacking me because I can't remember, and you've come here all guns blazing. You can't remember the sources that you're talking about.
I can remember Petrus Ephron, and you can try and ridicule all you like. It doesn't change the
That's
fact
one thing.
that when your video was challenged, you removed
It's
the
not my video.
comment.
It's actually Adnan and you.
No, but you posted it on your channel.
Okay, no problem.
You framed the debate in a way that was insincere.
okay, is there
You
anything else
framed
to
the debate in a way that was insincere.
Okay, I'm bad. Okay, what else do you have to say?
That's
I'm
it.
bad.
That's it.
Sounds like my wife, really.
Excuse me for interrupting. One minute. Forgive me for interruption. We have come to listen to this gentleman, and you are behaving like a dog in the manger. I'm sorry to say.
Well done.
There's another
Well
argument.
done. Well done.
Sorry to say.
I'm
We
sorry.
have come to
If you're
listen
sorry, it's
to-
okay. I forgive you.
We have come to listen to this gentleman, you are behaving like a dog in the manger.
I was here before you.
Well,
It's like we were having a conversation.
Joseph,
can you allow us to
do
listen to
you
him?
want to talk about something meaningful?
Yes.
So I thought that was meaningful, but we can talk about something else.
Because I'm not here to defend myself. If you want to say I'm a bad man, I'm happy to take it on
We
the
can
chin.
talk about how when Islam comes under attack, you will do everything to evade and to distract than deal with the actual accusation.
So what's Islam? Is Islam Muslims? Are you
No,
talking about
not
Islam,
Muslims. No, talking about.
Civilization or
I would talk more about civilization, like throughout history, but we can also talk about the actual religion itself. It'd be rather whichever. But I would say whenever either of those come under attack,
But
You will do everything in your power.
Joseph, you're a clever man. You're an individual that's done some education in this country. When you say the word Islam, and you refer to it as an inanimate, it's an entity really. It's a set of ideas.
Yeah, I'd agree
so
with
you
that.
say it's like saying if Pythagoras' theorem comes under attack, Pythagoras' theorem attack it and try and evade. It's not a living thing to react that way, is it? It can only be enacted through people's actions, Muslims. Right?
People defend their ideology. That's
if
all
you're
I'm saying, and I'm saying that
and
your way of defending yours isn't sincere.
No problem, I'm bad. No problem. There's very many bad Muslims. I'm sure you'd agree there's many bad Jews as well, yeah?
Yeah.
Okay, so what's the discussion about?
The discussion is about you propagating Dawah.
Okay. So it seems like you got a gun with no bullets in it and you're just shooting. You have nothing to say to me today, do you?
No, I absolutely have something to say to you.
Please.
All right, so we can deal with the actual issue. The issue was Jewish civilization and Islamic civilization.
I think Adnan
and
is better to deal with that.
Okay, so you said, is there anything we could talk about? I gave you a subject.
No. You agreed, by the way, in that discussion with him, and that, if you want to go into detail, you can go into it with Adnan, because he's done more research than me on this matter. But you agreed that there were points in Islamic history that Jews were treated well,
absolutely,
and that they lived harmoniously with Muslims. So that's fine. What we're saying is that the Islamic empires that existed for 1,200 years, whatever it was, they had the propensity to produce that kind of result. So it's not always.
What's that kind of result?
A result of harmony between Muslims.
Okay, so when the hadith talk about forcing the Jew to the narrow side of the road.
Okay, so let's deal with that, right? So the hadith that Sahih Muslim, which talks about فَأَطُّرُوهُمْ إِلَى side them, put them to the side of the tariq, of the way. And Nawawi comments on this because he does a sharh of Sahih Muslim, and he says about this that this is in the context of war.
So why does it talk about the street? It doesn't talk about war anywhere in the hadith.
It says tariq, pathway.
Yeah, pathway.
No, but every hadith is surrounded by certain context. So An-Nawawi for us, he's a sharh. He does the sharh of the hadith. He's not an apologist. He lived a very long time, even before Ibn Taymiyyah. He's a person we take. So I'm giving you a scholarly source. You can check it. He's a Shafi'i. He says that this applies in the context of war, and this was connected to some of the wars that existed between the Muslims and the Romans at that time as well.
And so why then throughout Islamic history, when there was no war, when there were times of peace, this has been enacted?
Well, throughout Islam, look, Joseph, once again, you're a clever guy. When you say throughout Islamic history, I mean, there's so much history there to talk about in one breath.
Why should a religion that's perfect be subject to such gross interpretation or misinterpretation?
Well, I'm not conceding you the point that all of Islamic empires, from Spain to the Abbasids to the Umayyads to all of those empires, every single one of them had that kind of a relationship with Jewish people. I'm not conceding that to you, and I don't think you could prove that easily. I don't think I could,
So we've got lots of Jewish writings from Jews who lived under different caliphs.
Some caliphs might have done bad things, like the Muwahhidun and Murabitun, and I agree, I accept. They were very harsh with Muslims, and they were very harsh with Jews.
Yeah.
So I agree with that. But what I'm saying is, I'm not here to defend those people. I'm here to look. I'm not. I'm here to defend the Quran and the Sunnah.
But that's what I'm saying. If the Quran and the Sunnah can be perverted so easily.
No, anyone can have a bad interpretation of things.
But so only you have the good
No, I
interpretation.
quoted you a scholarly source.
But this is the difficulty with this argument. If something is divine and from God, and the perfect instruction for humanity, yet it talks about things which, on the surface, seem pretty bad. So slavery, forcing people.
So you talk about the Old Testament?
No, we can go there. Absolutely, we can go there.
No, hold on, because these things apply to the Old Testament.
So I agree. And I can give you a Jewish explanation.
So this argument applies to yourselves.
Yeah, we can definitely go there.
Right.
But you're saying this is a religion from God that's perfect and unchanging.
Yep.
Yet Muslims throughout history have based, I would say, quite
you seem quite. What are you talking about? Can you get to the point? I mean,
we just gave an example of
and I've
Muhammed.
explained it. I say that I don't accept that interpretation. That's talking about war. It's talking about combat. And I've given you some scholarly sources.
But there were many scholars who are more authoritative than you. So Ibn Kathir is an example.
What does he say? He doesn't do a sharh of the hadith. He does a tafsir of the Quran. And Nawawi does a sharh of Sahih Muslim, so it's more applicable here. And by the way, Nawawi is more authoritative than Ibn Kathir when it comes to hadith because he was a muhaddith.
Yeah.
Whereas Ibn Kathir was a mufassir.
Okay.
Okay, and he came after him, by the way.
And that's fine, but is he obviously not more authoritative than you? Ibn Kathir?
Yeah, but I know he's more authoritative than Ibn Kathir in this. What I'm trying to say to you is, I'm not denying the. Look, before you do this, let me agree with you, right?
Okay.
There's verses of the Quran and ahadith that the Prophet narrated, which can be conceivably used, by jurists and lay people in order to create some kind of to create problems for communities. Okay, and I think the same thing can be applied to every religion.
I agree.
And more specifically the Abrahamic ones. Right?
So I would agree, and I think here's the distinction.
And I'm just telling you, me personally, my personal opinion on that hadith is as follows: that it does not apply in a generic sense, even if Jews and Christians lived with underneath Islamic law.
We could go through every single
And
one.
I'm giving you my source,
We
it's
could
not
go
for
with
me.
Jews being able to live in Mecca and Medina. We could go to Muslims being able to capture slaves at time of war.
Well,
we could
okay.
do with legalized rape. There's so many different areas which could be perceived by somebody like you and myself
So hold
as
on.
slightly
So
problematic.
you said the third thing, let's just deal with the most egregious of those contentions, which is the third one you've mentioned, which can, I think, easily be repudiated.
Which one's that? Rape.
Yeah, so you said legalized rape.
Yeah.
So can you give me your source for this?
So an example would be when you take a slave. A Muslim is allowed to have relations with his slave, and then there's a question on the status of the children. There's a question on
What is the question on the sales? No, you don't need your phone. Just
I do need my phone because I don't want to say something incorrect.
Okay, well you've already done that. So
Okay, so you're saying that a Muslim is not allowed to have relations with his slave woman?
What I'm saying, let's be very clear. You said legalization of rape. Yes?
But that's what that is by
No,
British
I
law.
said
By
that
British
can-
law, that's law. You can't. Can a Muslim, can a husband, can a wife refuse a husband?
Yes.
That's not what the Quran says.
No, hold on. If she refuses her husband, the man can't force her.
Yeah.
And the same
what
thing.
does the
hold on.
Quran say?
Let me
What's the
explain-
Quran say
can I
then?
explain?
Yeah.
The
And then
Quran
we'll go on the
doesn't
slave
mention it.
women.
The word ikhtisab is not in the Quran.
It talks about you go and plough a field or something from memory.
Yeah, نساءكم حرث لكم فأتوا حرثكم إن شئتم. Your women are a tilth for you, so plough your tilth whenever you want.
Yeah.
But it doesn't mean that you can force them.
So does a
And
woman need a consent?
Yes.
Can you show me
Yes.
hadith that speaks to that?
Yes. So you said, and by the way, not only just at the time where there was indentured servants, they need to consent as well. Based on what hadith?
Indentured servants or slaves?
You can call them slaves if you want. I don't mind.
I mean, no. What's just for the
Well,
camera
by the
for
way,
myself? Can you make a distinction?
Actually, an indentured servant, from an academic perspective, is a type of slave. But it's a type of slave which is not, child slavery or something like that. But
Okay,
going back.
no.
Yeah.
How does a slave that's captured in a time of war relate to what you just described?
Yeah. So that's exactly.
Can the slave who was captured at a time of war go free?
Yes.
No, they can't.
Okay. Now you've asked me a question,
Okay.
then you've answered it for me.
Okay, so I don't believe that's true. How can a
I-
slave go
well,
free? Yeah,
no,
yeah.
you've asked two questions, and I'm keeping giving you
perfect.
the answer you don't want to hear.
Yeah.
All right. So the first question you asked was, can a woman decide not to have sex with her husband? Yes, she'll be sinful for it, just like the husband.
Okay, so you should be sinful.
Yeah. No, hold on. Can I?
Yeah.
Can you allow me?
Yeah.
Both ways, man.
The husband and the wife, when they get a nikah, which is the contract of marriage, which many scholars say is a business contract. That's what it is in essence. Like Ibn Qudamah says that a lot of Hanafi say that. If the husband refuses the wife for no good reason, or the wife refuses the husband, it's exactly the same either way. Because if there's no good reason, there's no marad, there's no disease or anything like that. The whole point of marriage is that you're meant to facilitate. It's meant to be facilitative. It's meant to make things easy for each other. Now, the reason why, by the way, sorry, George, look, put it away if you don't mind for a second. Let's have a one-to-one discussion. It's not about just attacking Islam and this. Let's have a discussion. Honestly, if you really want to learn and this and that, we can do it.
No, I just need sources to respond because I'm not Muslim and I'm not an expert like yourself. And so,
I'm not an expert, but I'm
and
quoting
so
the expert.
But the issue with last time was I believe Adnan didn't know his sources, so I just want to make sure what I say is
I will
correct.
tell you exactly what. Can you look at me, please? Sorry, I try and pay you the courtesy of looking at you. So, look, what I was going to say is that the question of rape is absolutely unacceptable in Islam. What's the evidence from that? The evidence for that is what Ash-Shafi'i wrote from the Quran and Sunnah. La darar wa la dirar. Hadith. You can't cause harm to yourself or reciprocate harm. You can't cause harm to other people. And so, based on this hadith, all of the scholars of Islam would say, because if you have sex with a woman, sorry to be very explicit here, but without her consent, without her wanting to do it, it's going to cause our harm. Would you agree?
I would agree.
Yes.
But
No.
Yeah.
And Ash-Shafi'i would agree, Malik would agree, and in fact it's mentioned in their books, where both of those men, in the case of Malik it's been narrated upon him, but in the case of Ash-Shafi'i in his Kitab source, his kitab is called Kitab where he says with an indentured servant, if she refuses you, in other words, she does not give her a consent, and you force yourself upon her, then you are actually you have a punitive punishment administered upon you. Now, the second question you asked was, can an indentured servant be freed if they want to? And the answer to that is categorically yes. And what's the evidence for that? It's in chapter 24, verse 33, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about mukataba. Now, what is mukataba? According to Al-Qurtubi, who is the Mufassir of the Quran in Spain, and one of the most authoritative in the Islamic history, he said that a mukataba, and he quoted some salaf, he quoted some sahabis. He said that, like Ibn Mas'ud and others, if someone who's living in the house of an individual wants to be freed and says, look, I don't want to be with you and I don't want to be in this setup anymore, and they go to Al-Qadi, which is a judge, and then they tell the judge, I don't want to be in this house anymore, and if they don't have a criminal record, in alima fihim khayra.
And this is non-Muslims?
Non-Muslims as well. Yes, non-Muslims as well.
Okay, so just because can you explain that?
Yeah.
So
Can
you're
I
telling me
explain?
that just very quickly, you're telling me that at a time of
No,
war.
but you didn't let me finish that last sentence. Sorry, I apologize. So in that case, if they go to the Qadi, Al-Qurtubi says, they can forcibly be freed. So in other words, if that person is not happy in that situation, they will forcibly be freed. In other words, why is it now, the question is, why would someone want to be in that situation? The reason is, because remember, this is an ancient time, you didn't have social housing, you didn't have, accommodations and so on. Yeah. Some people literally felt like that was only their only way that they can reintegrate into a society, to get provisions, to be protected by the military men that were living in their homes and so on. So some people opted, and this is in the historical record as well, up until the Mamalik, both in Egypt and in India, to be part of that system. So what I'm saying is that, Islamically speaking, that opinion does exist, and it's mentioned in our sources, and I'm giving you the sources. Do you see what I'm saying?
So I see what you're saying.
And is that fair? Is that fair to say?
That may be what you believe, but it's very, very hard for me to accept, and I'll explain why. Imagine I'm a Jewish tribe living in Medina, Khaybar, and the Jews and the Muslims, for whatever reason, come to be fighting each other, and there's a conflict. The Muslims slaughter all of the males, for my tribe. All of the men are killed. And you're telling me that not only would the Jewish children and women that survived the massacre want to be slaves, they would also want sexual relations with their Muslim masters. Now, if anyone looks at it, I'm making it real, because when you build
That's not making it real. That's just a straw man.
When you paint this ideal scenario, it was more primitive back then. Life was difficult. Life was good as a slave. What we need to do that is contextualize that to reality.
I didn't say can you call me right? Because you were just upset with me for deleting your comment.
Okay,
well, now you're doing something more.
You didn't say primitive. What did you say then?
I never said life was good as a slave. I never made that.
Or better than.
No, I never made that.
Okay, and then I misunderstood your argument.
Okay, no, just put it on notes what I say so that you don't misquote me.
Okay, so what did you say?
What I said was, my main argument was that in the Islamic tradition, there is this opinion which is attributed not only to a Qurtubi, but it goes back to the Sahaba.
Why would a slave want to remain a slave? That's the question.
What I'm saying is, in that time, where there was a... Sorry. So one sentence at a time. That it's in the records, they can free themselves forcibly, number one. Number two, what I said was that some did not opt to do that directly because they feared the military. Like, for example, now you have to remember that there were wars going on. They free themselves, they have to get their own accommodation, they have to get their own housing, they have to pay their own bills, and they're going to be in their own danger. Now, if you're in a house, seriously, if you're in a house and this person is protecting you, seriously, they're military. They've got swords. And remember, everyone is, it's a bit like America, everyone's got swords. These guys don't have
I
swords.
thought that's basically what I
Get
said, but
away.
it's fine. Now that you've corrected me,
It's
can I
not
make my
about better,
point?
it's just about fear of, okay.
So what I was
yes.
trying to do is contextualize it so people
Yeah.
that are watching
Well,
can
that's the
understand.
that's the
So
context.
in Syria, there is a conflict, at the
Now.
moment. Now, there were people that were taking slaves,
Yes, and unjustly.
And there's
That's the-
unjustly,
yes,
absolutely,
yes.
we're both in agreement.
Yeah, yeah.
ISIS, Daesh are horrible.
Yes.
Now the same scenario exists, and what you're basically arguing is that the slaves who were living under ISIS or under anyone would be so afraid of wider conflict that they'd rather remain slaves.
It could be like
And even if that were the case,
be
it
like
doesn't make it morally right. It's actually quite a scary concept. So I'm going to
Well, it
read.
depends on
I'm
the
going to.
context. Well,
I haven't made my
morally
point.
right, it's in the Bible.
You spoke.
Hold
You
on,
spoke.
Joseph, hold on.
No. I let you speak. Please give me the same courtesy.
So can you
I
address the fact that it's in the Bible as
can
well?
you let Muhammad? I let you speak. Please let
You're
me.
a Jew at the end of the
Yeah,
day.
absolutely. So,
Yeah. So and tell me, hold on, sorry. Joseph, sorry.
Can I
What-
please, Muhammad? I let you speak for a long
Can I
time.
have one more thing?
No. I let you speak. Let me respond. I listened to what you said. So I'm going to read from the Hadith.
Yes, okay.
Narrated Abdullah bin Zama,
What book is it?
Sahih Bukhari, that he heard the Prophet delivering a sermon, and he mentioned the she-camel and the one who hamstrung it. Allah's apostle recited, when the most wicked man among them went forth.
Surah Shams, chapter 91.
You know your stuff. Then he said, a tough man whose equal was rare and who enjoyed the protection of his people, like Abi Zama, went forth to him and hamstrung it. The Prophet then mentioned about the women in his sermon, it is not wise for any of you to lash his wife like he lashed a slave, for he might sleep with her in the evening. Then he advised them not to laugh when somebody breaks wind, and it goes on to something else. But there's an example of saying where a slave master can lash a slave. I'm going to bring a few more and then you can respond.
Just one at a time because it's going to be convoluted otherwise. So the reason why that is there, number one, you're not allowed to lash your slave. Okay, what is it talking about? Can I explain? Number two, the Quran says that slaves, in terms, because in Islam you have punitive laws like lashing,
Yeah.
Slaves get half of the amount that a normal believer gets. It's in Surah An-Nisa, chapter 4 of the Quran.
Yeah.
Number three, what we're talking about, so for example, where an offense would be punishable by death if it was a non-Muslim, it was a Muslim, but in a case where the Muslim is free, with the slave, they wouldn't have the death penalty impinged upon them.
That doesn't reconcile with what
No,
we're
hold
saying.
on, let me explain. However, the administrator of the punishment, in some cases, can be the owner themselves. Does that make sense?
No, it says it is not wise for any of you to lash his wife like he lashes his slave.
Okay, no, hold
like
on.
he lashes him.
No, am I agreeing with you or disagreeing? I'm saying that I agree that in some jurisprudential schools of thought, some scholars say that you can administer the punishment yourself. So, for example, if you saw the indentured servant having sex with another indentured servant, well, let's go even further. Sorry. Let's go even further.
Then
Excuse me.
it's not contextualized to the wife.
No, but that's why you have to do something called Jama'a Adilla. You have to look at all the dalils. Look, this is a decontextualized approach to Islamic jurisprudence. You're bringing me singular hadiths.
Okay, I'll bring more. I'll bring more.
No, I understand. But you're not willing to reconcile something. Joseph, please. Joseph, in the book of Numbers 31:18, it says you can take the slaves that have not known any men and have sex with them and rape them. You're talking to me about rape in the Quran and the Sunnah. Can you explain this verse?
So I will say
I've already explained my side. Now it's your turn.
No, absolutely. I'm going to just finish on my point.
Then
because
explain.
No, explain for the
Yes,
truth sake.
okay.
Absolutely. So narrated
Because it seems
Abdullah.
a bit of too much like hypocrisy.
I can understand why you'd run away from the question.
No, I didn't run
Abdullah
away from
bin
it.
Zama, the Prophet said, none of you should flog it. This is Sahih Bukhari
Yes,
again.
yes, I've already
None of you
explained.
should flog his wife as he flogs a slave, then have sexual intercourse with her in the last part of the day. In the first part is fine, but the last part.
No, come on. They say don't have sex, don't whip the slave, and then have sex with them. Don't do this. What's the problem?
It's saying in the last part of the day.
So what does that mean? Mafhum mukhalafa is
In the
actually-
morning, it's fine.
No.
In the,
No. That's not the mafhum mukhalafa. It doesn't work like that. That's right. Listen, the point is now, what I'm saying to you is, I've already explained to you how this works in the grander context of things. What we're saying is, sometimes the owner, or whatever you want, the one who's in charge, the master, whatever it is, that person, when they have the indentured servant,
Can we just call them a slave? It's someone you capture in
I can
conflict.
call them whatever I want to call them.
Okay, fine.
An indentured servant is actually one of the category in academics. It's one of the ways of. It's a category of slave anyway. What I'm saying is, and by the way, I don't know why I'm smiling because you're going to run away from Numbers 31:18, which I've already explained. Look how many things I've explained. At least 4 hadiths and 4 ayahs. Here I'm saying to you, yes, there are some situations in which that would be possible. However, that is only in a situation where there has been already a trial and a court and so on. And I've explained that to you. Now explain this to me. In Numbers 31:18, in your book, which you believe is the Torah and the God's word, it says that Moses is commanding the people to take the slaves, not only take them, but the ones who have not known any man, the young girls, have sex with them forcibly, and then also here...
Where does it say have sex with them forcibly?
It says you can have sex... Read the verse.
So get the verse.
And by the way...
The volume?
Chapter 31, verse 18 of the book of Numbers in your Torah, where it says you take them as slaves, not only that, but have sex with them, the ones who have never known a man. Now some scholars have interpreted that to mean in a forcible way. Now, you could argue it's not, and
Which scholars
For
say
example,
that?
the Palestinian Encyclopedia.
That's not a scholar.
What do you mean? The encyclopedia was written by a layman? I don't think so.
No. I mean, rabbinic sources. Rabbinic sources.
Well, you explain the
when we
verse.
speak
You
Islam, I don't go
explain,
to
you
secular.
explain.
I go to your primary sources.
I'll send you some primary sources if you want.
Okay, please.
No problem. But what I'm saying here is, the point is, you're shooting yourself in the foot by asking me about things that not only are present in your book, but are present to an extent whereby there's no restriction. Islam came to restrict this kind of thing that was there in the Jewish tradition, where you can go in the Malachites and take the woman and destroy everyone in the village. There's no such. And I want you to explain 31:18. And I want you to tell and look at also Deuteronomy chapter 21 verse 10 onwards. And I want you to also explain to me in the Malachites and 1 Samuel's how all the village can be annihilated, villages can be annihilated, killed, everyone, and apostasy in the by the way in the Torah, in the book of Deuteronomy, in chapter 17 of Deuteronomy.
Let's just stick on slaves and then we can come on to apostasy.
Fine. Now apostasy, you kill the person yourself in the home. Kill the person yourself in the home. Now in Islam there's no such thing. If it's your brother, if it's your young thing, you kill them yourself in the home. So all of these things, Islam came to limit it, to reform it, to clean it up, to allow it to solve your issues. So now I wouldn't even say that they're wrong morally, because I have no reason to say that they're wrong morally. If God said it, it's correct, but God didn't say it, I believe, in the way that it's mentioned in the Torah, in the Torah.
I think you've touched on the fundamental difference between Judaism and Islam. So Islam is a literalist religion. Whatever the Quran and the Hadith say, as long as it's authentic, the Hadith...
Well, there are literalists in Islam.
No.
Not everyone is a literalist. I'm not a literalist.
Mohammed, you asked a question, let me respond.
But you said it's a literalist religion. I'm not a literalist.
No, let me respond.
I'm not a Zahiri.
Listen, what I'm saying is, Muslims believe that the Quran is the perfect word of God. By the way, is Ramadan coming tonight?
Yeah.
Ramadan Kareem.
Thank you.
The Quran is the perfect word of God, and the Hadith... Sorry, it's a little distracting. The Quran is the perfect word from God. The Hadith is the perfect part of the perfect instruction for Muslims to follow, Judaism differs slightly. Judaism is, and the Quran itself actually says this, Judaism is much a religion on earth as it is in heaven.
Where does it say
So what did that make me explain?
No, the Quran doesn't say that. Don't misquote the Quran.
No, I didn't say, I said the Torah.
You said
The Quran, you said Quran.
You said in the Quran it said that.
Sorry, my mistake. I'm saying,
okay, right.
I'm saying in the Torah we believe. The Quran. Sorry, the Quran says that the Jews worship their rabbis or something to that effect. What does it say when it speaks about the rabbis?
What do you call it? أحبارهم أربابا من دون الله والمسيح ابن مريم. Now they take chapter 9, verse 30. It says that they take their rabbis and their monks as lords beside God and so on.
So effectively what Judaism is very much a religion on this world. So we have something called the Sanhedrin, which is a rabbinic court, and they have the authority to define and interpret what the Torah says, and then it's binding for all of the Jewish people.
But you accept that.
And so to come back to your point.
Yes.
So do I believe that rape in the Torah, the Quran, anything is wrong? Yes. Does the Torah say the verses that you said? It doesn't say it in the way you said, but yes, it does say that you can capture the women. It doesn't say you can force yourself on them. That's something that you added. But it absolutely does say slavery, like in the Quran, is legal in the Torah. Surrounded on both sides by. The Quran and the Torah both say that slavery is fine. Yeah? The distinction between the two is, if the Quran says something, Muslims can't really change that. That's set in stone. Within Judaism, while we can't change the wording, we can change the application by the mechanism of Beddin. And so there is a Jew today, or in the last, I would argue, 2,000, or certainly 1,000 years, certainly, let's say, just a minute, probably, in the last 300 years, that's been pro-slavery. Slavery is very much frowned upon within Jewish circles for a long time. In your edge cases.
You're equivocating between what Jewish circles are doing. Let me ask you a direct question.
Okay.
Hold on, sorry. Let me ask you a direct question. Numbers chapter 31, verse 18.
Yeah.
Is it God's word?
Yeah. So
Is it moral?
So
Yes or no?
no, I'm trying to answer in my own words. For me, it's not a yes/no question. So I would say, by the standards of the day, back then it was. By today's standards, definitely not.
So okay. So God, hold on, this is very important.
Yeah.
Yes. So you're saying by today's standards.
Yeah.
Now, where do we derive morality? From the standards of the day or from God's word?
So for the Jewish people,
Yes.
it's a fusion of the two.
Okay, no problem. But this slavery that you're talking about, was God right or wrong to allow it to happen in your books?
So I don't believe it exists in the way that you describe it.
No problem, but
you
you already conceded to the point that slavery exists in the Old Testament.
Yeah.
So in your vision, is there any conceivability where there's a time and a place where slavery can be morally okay?
I would say it's always morally not okay.
Okay, so God was wrong in Deuteronomy.
So
and Numbers.
you're reading a book which relates to a time where slavery was everywhere.
No problem.
Hold
on.
No.
I'm no problem. Yes.
And so from your position, and I understand your position.
Forget about my position.
No, because you're talking mine and I'm talking yours. That's what we both do.
Yeah, no
you're
problem.
saying by your definition, because God says that slavery is morally okay, for you sometimes slavery is okay, but in other times it's not. I'm saying for me, it's
Joseph,
never okay.
I did you the courtesy of answering your questions, and I'm happy to do that courtesy again. But I just want you to do something for me now, which is answer my questions.
I just said it's immoral.
So you're saying it's immoral. Okay, now, is it always immoral in every time and every place?
To take possession over someone,
Yes.
For me, yes.
Yeah, so the Bible is wrong.
It's not that the Bible is wrong. The Bible is, in a way, a historical document.
No problem. Numbers 31:18 is wrong.
So again, Moses is a leader and Moses is a Navi are two separate things. Now I don't know what's divine revelation. Is God saying that you need to take the let me read the verse so I don't want to miss. I don't want to miss.
Because now what's happening, and everyone can see it, I'll be honest with you, Joseph, you're fumbling all over the place.
No, but it's the difference is, Muhammed. I will get here on the microphone, irrespective of what, listen, irrespective of what any of the scripture says, and I would say that slavery is immoral all time.
So
you won't.
No, hold on.
You won't.
Listen, Joseph, I don't care what, I'm asking now a question. You can't have your cake and eat it both, Joseph. Either the Bible is wrong or the morality is wrong. Or the morality is right and the Bible is wrong. Simple. Would you agree?
Which morality?
Would you agree with that?
Which morality?
Slavery is wrong. Okay, no problem. Now, if you believe slavery is always wrong. At every time, even if it means you're trying to reform the thing. Yeah? At every time it's wrong. You have to look at 31:18. If it's categorically wrong, listen to my words, not consequentially wrong, it's categorically wrong.
And actually,
if it's categorically wrong, is slavery categorically wrong?
Slavery is wrong, yeah.
Categorically wrong.
Yes.
Yes.
For me, yeah.
So Deuteronomy 21:10 and Numbers 31:18.
It's not just that. Muhammad
is wrong.
Throughout the Torah, it mentions in different places that you can keep slaves.
Fine, that's wrong.
And I'm saying that's wrong, yeah.
Thank you very much for that. That's consistent.
Now for you.
No.
You answer the question.
I don't say it's categorically wrong at all. I say it's
So you think the slavery
let me explain. I say it's consequentially wrong.
Okay, explain what you mean.
Well, this is very important now. Because consequences, yes. As a result of consequences, I believe in certain contexts, that if a slave is taken out of one severe station into another better station, or if slavery as an institution, I'm telling you what I believe, I don't care
Okay,
what.
but can you deal with the hadith I quoted?
No. It doesn't contradict my morals. I'm saying that slavery is consequentially
But they
wrong.
weren't slaves,
But
they
not
were captured in war.
categorically. Listen, I'm saying slavery is wrong in certain times and places, not all times and
But
places.
you contextualize my point to Devarim, to Bamidbar. I'm contextualizing yours.
I will even go into the Old Testament and say that those passages about slavery in the Old Testament and in any thing was to do with what you said before, which is the fact that there was a context of pre-existing slavery there, and you can't expect slavery as an institution to be abolished from the face of the earth.
So perfect.
So no.
Our religion
Hold on.
outlaws bacon. Yeah, outlaws the eating of bacon, but permits slavery. I know you are. You're doing my job.
Yes, I'm defending your religion better than you. I'm saying that. Hold on. I'm saying that the Old Testament might have, even from that angle, you can say it's consequential. If you say it's categorically wrong, you've already based your morality somewhere else. So what kind of, sorry to say, I'm going to ask you a very straight one. What kind of Jew are you?
So I'm a Jew that follows the Talmud.
Not really.
Really? Okay, fine. Thank you.
No. You don't. You have to follow the Torah. The Torah is the word of God.
No Jew follows the Torah in abstract. Every Jew follows the Torah through the Talmud.
What kind of Jew is this, man? I'm talking about, you're going back to what Moses said. Moses, God revealed the God's thing to him. What he said.
Muhammad. Now, coming back to the point I made.
for you.
No. Sophia was captured at a time of war.
Yes.
This wasn't a slave woman that was taken contextually from being a slave who was ill-treated to being or any of the slaves that are captured in war. These were not slaves, they were free people.
Let's do one at a time. So Sophia, yes, she was captured at the time of war. Correct.
Yeah.
Was she given a choice?
To be captured?
No,
because one of the generals took her, and then one of the Sahaba.
Do you think you know more about this than me? Be honest.
You asked me a question, so I was responding to your question.
No, but
and it's not an assumption. You ask me a question, I
fine.
respond.
I might have some knowledge about this that you don't have. Agreed?
But maybe if you ask me a question, you allow me to respond.
All right. So what's your case? What's your about Sophia?
So with Sophia,
Yes.
one of the Sahaba was going to take her for himself, yeah? And then one of the Sahaba told Muhammad that she's the son of, who was her father? And Muhammad then took her for himself, yeah?
It wasn't like that.
That's what the hadith says.
No. Well, you got one hadith you're looking at, but there was more than one hadith. That's the problem. I have to be honest with you, Joseph, yes? This decontextualized approach of Islamic learning will not get you far. In order to understand the seerah, you have to, what you call jama' adillah. Bring all the dalils together, all the evidences together that talk about one mas'ala, and then you understand the time frame a little bit more. So let me explain. There are more than one hadith. There's one hadith that says this, what you said, yes? Which says that there was a person, a sahabi, he wanted to take her as a war booty and so on, but then, because she was very beautiful and so on, he realized that Prophet Muhammad he wanted to, give her to, like as a gift to him. Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. What he did, Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, is he went to her, and then number one, listen to this. The one hadith says that she was asking him, why did you do this to my family? Why did you do this to her? And he had to go through a whole explanation. This was what happened. We had a pact, we had a treaty and whatever. And then it was a whole process of discussion. After that discussion, he then gave her khiyar. He gave her an option. Another hadith. The other hadith says that he gave her an option. Either go back to your family or you can come with me. So she, according to the hadith...
Her family, her husband and father had been killed.
No, her family, our extended family.
Except not her immediate family, like her dad and her parents and
her brother and father have been killed.
And husband. She was married.
Yeah, we're not talking about those guys that were killed. Your family are not three individuals. Your family could be your ashira, your cousins, uncles, granddad, whatever. Anyway, so either you go with it, and so she chose not only to be with him but to become Muslim. That's the narrative. Now you could cuss aspersion. You could say, well, I don't believe this hadith statements. But to be honest with you, the hadiths, as you know, they put everything out there. They put things which are even embarrassing to the Prophet and his wives and so on. So what we're saying is that, and this is called the principle of embarrassment in history. Say when you have hadiths where we put it all together, and you see some things which are undermining some things about the Prophet, and it's, you know, in the sense that it makes him look like a human, right? It humanizes him. So those things are included. We even have the satanic verses hadith, right? It's still in the books. No one has taken it out and tried to get rid of it. The point is, hadiths are usually indiscriminate. So what I'm saying is, based on the hadith literature, the relationship between Safiya and Muhammad was that he gave her a choice, and he went through a whole process of her speaking, and then she chose to be a Muslim.
So just to go over the context.
Yes, of course.
Her father, her husband are slaughtered.
Yes, killed.
By Muhammad.
In war,
Yeah, in war.
Yeah, no problem.
That same day, she is taken captive by one of the Sahaba who wants to keep him for himself.
Why does it say the same day?
Okay, I'll read it. Okay, so there's at least four hadith that I've got in this hadith. The messenger, this is Sunan and so the messenger of Allah invaded Khaybar, and we prayed at Al-Ghada.
Yes.
There in the early in the morning when it was still dark. Then the Prophet rode, and Abu Talha rode and was riding behind Abu Talha. The Prophet of Allah passed through the lane of Khaybar quickly, and my knee was touching the thigh of the messenger of Allah, and I could see the whiteness of the thigh. When he entered the town, he said, Allahu Akbar, Khaybar is destroyed. Whenever we approach a hostile nation to fight, or whenever we approach a nation to fight, evil will be for their work. Abdul Aziz said, they said Muhammad has come. Abdul Aziz said, some of our companions said, with his army we conquered Khaybar and gathered the captives. So we conquered Khaybar and we gathered the captives. Dia came and said, O Prophet of Allah, give me a slave girl from among the captives. So he's now saying, give me a slave girl. So we're on the day, give me a slave girl from among the captives. He said, go and take a slave girl. He took Safiya bint Huyay. Then a man came to the Prophet and said, O Messenger of Allah, you gave Dia Safiya bint Huyay, and she is the chief mistress of Qurayza and Nadir, and she is fit for no one but you. So this woman, this slave, is fit for no one but Muhammad. And so this is all on the day.
Well, she was a slave, remember she became a wife, right?
So not yet, she's not a wife, at the moment she's still a
Well,
slave.
just to make clear that, you know, she didn't say as a slave, she was free.
When the Prophet saw her, so he saw her beauty, he said, take any other slave girl from the captives. He said, the Prophet of Allah, what dowry did you give her? He, Anas, said, herself he set her free and married her, which is what you're saying. So, that's one, another hadith.
But it doesn't say anything on the day, you say on the day.
No, it's literally on the day for amongst the captives.
Joseph, that's wrong. No, it doesn't say on the day. Let me tell you why that's wrong. Do you know why that's wrong? Can I explain why that's
please.
wrong? Because there's another hadith. Look at me, please.
Sorry, I just want to say,
The reason why that's wrong is because she went through Iddah. She went through a whole, the process of Iddah is like some say, sometimes it can be 1 month, sometimes it can be a 3-month period. Where you have to, when you're divorced, you have to go through that process.
So all of these slaves were kept in some pen for 3 months where they became Muslim?
No, they might have been in the house of the person that they were going to be with, but then there was no sexual intercourse. Or they might have been like that. It might have been the fact that they were floating around like that.
But irrespective, there's no escaping the fact this was a free woman.
No, she wasn't. She was a slave.
No, she was a free woman.
No, she was a
Her
slave.
family was slaughtered, and then she was made a slave.
No. She was a slave, and then she was freed by Prophet Muhammad.
No, she wasn't a slave in the Jewish community.
Oh, is that what you're talking about? Yeah. But in
The Muslims enslaved her.
Listen, let me explain to you something, right? In ancient worlds, everyone was a slave. Everyone. That was the nature of the day. Maybe the one empire that didn't do this practice was the Persian Empire at one point in time. But almost all of the empires of world history, when you had war, they would enslave individuals.
But that's my point.
They'll
You're
make them
saying
into
that this
prisoners
is
of war.
You
Now,
are saying that morally
no,
that's...
what I'm saying, morally, that process, I would say is consequentially wrong. Like now and here, where there's no slavery, it's been abolished, we shouldn't put it back into place.
But in Mauritania, where you still basically have slavery,
No,
is that
my
okay?
teacher's Mauritanian. My main teacher's Mauritanian.
Yeah.
Okay. And I explained. He went through a whole thing with me about this. I explained to him. He said that it's not allowed. What's going on there is illegal. It's not right.
It was recently made illegal, but it's very, very
Oh, but
widespread.
even before they made it illegal. Anyway, look. The point I'm making to you is, Joseph. Let me be frank with you. Okay. If you wanna, because we're always trying to be, academically ingenuous, and you're coming in and talking about hypocrisy and whatever in the beginning. What I want to say to you is very straightforward. You're a Jew, all right? Which means you believe in the Torah. We don't have to. This doesn't have to happen. Okay? We're trying to attack each other's holy books. That's why I paused.
It's not. I'm not trying to attack your holy book.
I know. But let me explain something. I looked at your holy book and I said you've got these verses in the Old Testament and so on, which frankly show an institution of slavery that doesn't have as many restrictions, or
You don't know what the because we go through the Hadith. We haven't been through the Talmud.
Let me explain something, right? Zakat, part of it goes to freeing slaves. The Quran says, وَمَا أَدْرَاكَ مَا الْعَقَبَةُ فَكُّ رَقَبَةٍ. What's the good way? Freeing slaves is a good way. The Quran, chapter 24, verse 33, says that if a slave can be made free against the will of the servant, as we said, and Qurtubi is a reference for that. We said that also there's some things like if you have sex with your wife in Ramadan, which is coming over right now, that you have to free a slave. If you say some words of insult, as we mentioned in Surah Mujadala, chapter 58 of the Quran says, فَتَحْرِيرُ رَقَبَةٍ, you have to free a slave. If you say an oath, and the oath is, you talk about an oath, right? If I say an oath and it was incorrect, you have to free a slave. The Quran is like a sieve, right? The institution of slavery is like sand. Instead of trying to open a latch, it said, okay, here's slavery, let's get rid of it slowly, incrementally, gradually. Now what I'm saying is that's the Islamic position that's not found in the Old Testament.
And this is the mistake you're making.
Can you give me a reference?
So perfect.
Yeah.
So in Judaism, as I said before, a literalist would read the Old Testament, and that's what many Christians do. They will read. In Judaism, we have a concept called the Karaite, who's like a Quranist, and you read the Torah, but no Jew reads the Torah in abstraction. So in Judaism, even in the Torah,
I mean, you're an academic, right? So saying no Jew is a bit foolish.
Sorry.
Look, you're an academic, right?
I wouldn't say that. No.
Okay, so you're an intelligent guy. So if you're an academic and intelligent guy, making the statement "no Jew" in the history of
No. There's a label for the Jews that do that, but the majority of Jews, like the majority of Muslims, follow the Hadith. Right. The majority a lot of what we're talking isn't in the Quran. We're talking the Hadith.
Some prioritize the Torah over the Talmud.
All Jews prioritize the Torah. Torah is primary source, and the Talmud supports it. But the Talmud is the glasses with which you read the Torah through.
Fine.
So just
by
to
the way,
connect
that's your school of thought.
No, that's the mainstream Orthodox Jewish.
There are some Jews who would disagree with your stance.
Jews?
Many.
No. Which Jews reject the Talmud?
Many. I'm not saying any Jews would reject the Talmud, but what I'm saying is your focus on the Talmud, right? Aside from the Torah, is something controversial in your community.
No, it's not. Give me one community that believes that.
What, Haredi Jews? Haredi Jews.
All Haredi Jews believe what I believe.
No.
All Haredi Jews follow the Talmud. If you go to any yeshiva, all they study is Talmud.
I didn't say that they didn't believe in the Talmud. I've never said that. The Quran even says that. It references it implicitly by saying that they follow the rabbis more.
Not only that, the Quran quotes the Talmud.
Well, that's what you think.
No. Someone who saves a life is like he saved all of humanity. Someone who destroys a life is like he destroys. That's the Talmud.
Yeah, okay, but it says in the Quran, when it says, "Man qatala nafsan bighayri nafsin aw fasadin fil ard." It doesn't say whoever saves a life. It says whoever saves a life for not creating corruption or for not killing a life. So it's not the same quotation. Anyway, number one.
No, you just added. You gave tafsir.
No, that's the Quran.
What's the Quran say?
The Quran says, "Man qatala nafsan bighayri nafsin aw fasadin fil ard faka'annama qatala an-nas jami'an." Whoever saves a life. Whoever kills somebody. Yes. Aside from for the thing of murder, for the the crime
Does
of...
it say
Yes.
aside from? Okay. okay.
فساد of all corruption in the land, it's as if you have killed all of humanity. من أحياها فكأنما أحيا الناس جميعا. Whoever saves them is like saying, so there's different phrases. Anyway, the point is this.
You should have said anything.
What I'm
You
making to
started
is, I've just given you 5 or 6 things which reform the
Judaism also reformed slavery before Islam.
No, I'm not talking about Talmud. Get me from Torah.
No. It's like saying I'm not talking about the Hadith. Give me from Quran.
No,
you
it's not
can't
Hadith.
separate the two.
Let me tell you what Talmud is, and you explain to me if I'm right.
Please.
Talmud is, like you said, in a way, but it's the rulings of those rabbis that goes even before, like it's rulings. It's rulings of the rabbis.
Which rabbis?
All the rabbis that came across time, and it's like basically case law. To say, yeah, it's like case law. So you refer to it, and they make the.
Have you been listening to my videos? Because I'm
Is that what
literally
it
one of the few people who
Is that
says
what it
this.
says?
This isn't what most Jews believe.
I've never heard
This
that.
is what I propagate.
I've said that.
Okay, you said that. You think like me.
Okay, so it's case law, isn't it? So we have that.
No. So
we have that in ijma'. We have that in ijma'.
No, you're mistaken. So
No,
the Talmud, there's basically
You said you said it, and I'm mistaken.
So no, and I'll explain why.
All right.
Because it's like half of what I say, but misconstrued slightly.
All right.
So in Judaism,
You're my sheikh, rabbi. Innit? So if I get it wrong, it's your fault. Go ahead.
in the Talmud, you have what's called the oral law, and in the Torah, you have what's called the written law.
Okay.
Some of the oral law, well, the oral law goes back to Moses.
Tarawih. Are you going to eat?
I'll very quickly run. The oral law goes back to Moses,
Yeah.
and the written law goes back to Moses.
Yeah.
Both go back to Moses.
Right.
What the Talmud also contains, as well as the oral law, which is like the Hadith, it contains the rulings of different Batei Din, of different religious courts. But that court goes back to Moses as well. So there was Moses and 70 elders was the first Beit Din, and that went all the way down to Rashi and Ravina, who were the rabbis who sealed the Talmud. And what you're saying is the second half, but you missed out the first half. All Jews, irrespective of whether they're like Haredi, Modern Orthodox, national religious, they all read the Talmud as a primary source. It's as important as the Hadith is for the Muslims.
Okay.
It's slightly secondary. And so to come back, so in the Torah, it talks about freeing the slaves. And you have, in the same way, Jubilee, it says, if your slave wants to remain, you have to pierce their ear as a sign. But if the slave wants to
Pierce their
remain,
ear.
which is what you're saying, yeah.
Like an animal.
No, listen. Listen.
I'm not going to
No,
play that game
no,
with you.
It's
Okay,
what
no.
you're saying. It's what you're saying.
We
It's
don't
saying,
have any piercing,
no,
by the
it's
way.
what you started your argument with. You started your argument with some slaves want to remain slaves. And the Torah is a testament to that. It
So
says
why
the
are
same
we
thing.
arguing with this?
So he says, let me finish.
Unbelievable.
No, so if we come round,
You're
if we come
joking.
round, if we come round, wait there.
Come on.
Calm down. So the Torah says that. It also says in the, it's also we're told. that
Wait. So please. Joseph. I really don't trust your tactics anymore. Do you know why? Because I was saying to you there was certain contexts in which slaves would be they were fearing to leave and this and that. And you know what you said? You said you were making a mockery out of it. Now you're saying the Torah says it. Unbelievable.
I'm saying at a
Joseph.
time of war.
So did I, bro.
No. I'm saying yours. I'm saying at a time of war,
So when
someone
it's
wouldn't want to be a
Islam,
slave.
it's a different thing.
No.
Okay, no
This is
problem.
after
Sorry.
many years of being a slave.
Okay, go ahead.
And so,
Anyways, I'm
my
not
point
gonna.
my point is really simple.
Go ahead, Joseph.
Judaism and Islam both have reforms for slavery. They institute rulings which attempt to make slavery more humane. I would agree with that. That's not a point of argument.
This guy has come my way, man. Well done.
No. Habibi, you have to wait. You have to wait for the but.
And في آخر كلامي.
You have to wait for the but. The but is slavery as an institution, irrespective
Yeah.
of how humane you try to make it, is that moral or is it moral? Immoral. And I would say, in all time, slavery is wrong.
So that makes it inconsistent with your beliefs.
So again,
Do you have conclusive
so as an example, and I'll make it even more relevant, and I'll reference it back to Chazal, the rabbis who codify the Talmud. So if someone commits a certain sin which is worthy of which by legal law commands the death sentence, then you would imagine the greatest mercy or the greatest deed you could do is carry out that sentence. Because if Allah or Hashem, God, wills that this person is put to death for adultery, for homosexuality, for murder, whatever it may be, you would imagine the most just and moral thing you could do is put that person to death. Chazal in the Talmud they rule, they say that a bet din, a religious court, because you mentioned something before which was incorrect. You said that I as an individual can put someone to death if they come into a house. You can't.
But that's
The Talmud is explicit. Listen,
But I didn't say that was
can I explain? Is explicit that the only time a person can be put to death is if they go up against the Beit Din, to the religious court. Now the Chazal rule that a court that puts one person to death in 70 years is considered bloody, so it's a bad court.
Yeah,
so
same with Islam.
Exactly, and so here you have the rabbis of the Talmud making a moral judgment that actually putting people to death for these crimes is immoral. We'll try everything we can to avoid
Perfect.
this.
Okay.
And so this
Good.
is
Great.
And so by the same definition, slavery is the same for me.
Yes.
So slavery, while it may be illegal, it may be legally okay by the book, according to Judaism and Islam, on an individual level, irrespective of whether it was 2,000 years ago or 2 years ago in Syria, I believe slavery is immoral and abhorrent.
Perfect. There's 4 words I want you to remember. One of them is consequentialism, yeah? The other one is categoricalism, if that's a word. Well, what's consequentially wrong? What's categorically wrong? Another word is objectively wrong. A 4th word is absolutely wrong, okay?
What's the difference between objectively and absolutely?
No, right, let me define. When you talk about consequentially wrong, it's wrong dependent upon circumstance, not wrong in and of itself. Categorically wrong is always wrong, time and place. That's the same as absolutely wrong, which means it's always wrong in time and place. But you can have an objective morality, which is what? Consequentially wrong. So in other words, you can have something which is wrong generally, but certain circumstances would dictate that it becomes right in other places. For example, in the Islamic tradition, the Quran says, "When it says that whoever is forced to eat pork, and there's no thing that they have to eat the pork, they can eat, there's no sin on them. So in other words, eating pork from an Islamic perspective is objectively wrong, but it's also consequentially wrong. It's not absolutely and categorically wrong. In other words, there is scope for it to be right in certain places and time. The same thing applies with slavery. Let me explain. In Islamic tradition, it's something called usul al-fiqh. You think it only exists in Judaism, it doesn't. Scholars who are called usulis and fuqaha, jurists, they sit down and they say, okay, what is applicable of the laws today? What should we put into place? What shouldn't we put into place? This goes into what I call Sharia consequentialism, which is we affirm that this is objective morality, but we also say there's a consequential element. Now the point I'm making to you is that you thought that this only applied in Judaism. I'm telling you the same thing applies in Islam.
It's a slightly different mechanism.
But you have a group of scholars saying, okay, look at
the Torah legislates.
Let me explain. So you're saying you can look at a prima facie, you can look at a verse in the Bible, like the one in Deuteronomy which says kill the apostate in your house, which on prima facie value says you can kill them, right? But then you're saying that you have these group of scholars that can sometimes look at applicability of it, right? I'm saying the same thing applies in Islam. So in Islam you have certain rulings which are completely not relevant to today. For example, the Quran, where it talks about having slaves, is not relevant to our society here in Britain. And if someone tries to go bring a woman or something like that, or tries to indenture a servant or whatever it may be, that will be seen as consequentially wrong from an Islamic perspective. Because the asl is,
so I understand your point.
The default position is that human beings have hurriya, which means freedom. So you can't put a free person into slavery in Islam.
Unless you capture them in a time of war.
And that's only done if you have an empire and a qaid and whatever.
But it doesn't matter. You can't take a free person and enslave them.
The scholars say, now this is why I had a discussion. Some scholars say, now that it's gone now, this whole institution is gone. Yeah. Should we reinstitute it? If really it's an objective sharia to get rid of it, like the sieve that we talked about it, does it make sense to reintroduce it? So as the scholars say, are divided. Some scholars say yes, some scholars say no. I take the view that it's not like that. My view is that actually if there was an empire or so on, that they shouldn't reinstitute that thing. So me and you, from that perspective, have the same view. We have religious tradition, we work within that tradition, we don't compromise our positions. We can say that slavery is consequentially wrong. We can even say that slavery today is something which would be abhorrent. But what we're saying is that there were certain ancient contexts in which it was justified because it was taken from one bad situation to a better one, and it was a gradualism and incrementalism that led to.
Can I do one
you see
thing?
what I'm saying?
Yeah, I understand what you're saying.
It's a bit
Can
useless to compare nowadays morality to the morality
But
of
more
the old
than
times.
that, he said something more than that. I'm going to ask you to take off your religious hat for 5 seconds.
I didn't know you were bald like that.
No, I said that's why I wear the hats. I'm not under all Jews' hats with a bald head. So my question for you is this: if you were to take off your religious hat, you made a statement which is very, very weird, and we have the same issue in Judaism. You said that eating pork is objectively immoral, but slavery is consequentially moral or immoral. Now, removing your religious hat for a minute and study that statement, it's very, very, very perplexing. If you were to go, for instance, to a tribe that hadn't encountered Judaism or Islam, who was living in the Amazon, or some Chinese person who was maybe familiar with other religions but not as familiar with Judaism and Islam, and you were to ask them, is eating bacon objectively moral or immoral, they would say it's not objectively anything, it's just eating bacon. But then you would go to slavery and ask the same question. Certainly in today's day and age, you would universally get that slavery is objectively immoral.
In the tribe.
It depends on the tribe.
I disagree with that. I think that some tribes, based on the socialization that we've had in history, actually would say that it's moral. Look at the Mayans, look at the Egyptians, look at the Mesopotamians.
Deal with the bacon rather than get lost in the argument, because we can argue this about it.
Well, that's a sociological case, all right? And this is a psychological investigation of nature versus nurture.
Bacon?
No. Have you done an experiment on it? Have you? Let me tell you a couple of things. You're talking about tribes. So let me.
Like bacon.
Oh, well, I
why was
promise you,
bacon objectively immoral?
Well, you believe that as well. You're a Jew, don't you?
No. So this is the whole thing, yeah.
Yeah.
I follow the religion. I don't say it's a moral or immoral to eat bacon. I don't eat bacon because Jews don't eat bacon. It's what our religious book says we shouldn't do. But I would, by the same definition, I will look at the institution of slavery and say that is objectively immoral.
You're getting this wrong, okay? Because
Maybe.
your anchorage seems to be on the popular discourse of the day. That's what your anchorage is on. I'm telling you, if you lived 300 years ago in this country, you would have no problem with slavery.
I agree.
No problem.
I agree.
You would have a problem with those who have a problem
Maybe
with it.
400 years, but definitely.
No, man, 200 years.
I might have been one of those campaigning for them.
No. You might have been a slave owner.
Bit of an SJW.
Right? I'm telling you, bro, you don't know that. It's ingrained within you now because you live in today's society. But what I'm saying is that God knows, look, you're a Jew, I'm a Muslim. I'm telling you something that maybe some Jewish rabbis would tell you as well. Have trust in God's law. Honestly,
So then slavery is moral?
no, I'm not saying it's moral. I'm saying it's consequentially either moral
Who
or
are you
immoral.
to decide what's consequentially and what's objective?
Well,
Why
look,
is bacon
I'm no
objective
one.
but slavery
No,
is so
I am saying God decides. You're saying God. Me and you don't have a problem with this. Both of our religious scriptures say the same thing. We are saying the same thing, Joseph.
But there are, for instance,
Yes.
there are commandments in the Torah
Right.
and in the Quran
Yeah.
that neither of us would carry out. I would assume
because of
that
the
you wouldn't.
consequential part.
Yeah, I would assume that if you were tasked with stoning someone to death for a particular thing, you would shy away from that because you're a nice guy. I don't think that's the commandment. You'd maybe run to go to the masjid.
Well, let me tell you, right? No, joking. Look, let me tell you how this works. I wouldn't stone someone to death, not despite the Sharia, but because of the Sharia. You have to understand.
So if all the conditions have been met.
No, I'm not the man to stone anyone to death.
No, but
Well, put me in a context. Might as well.
they
take this
say,
100 years
Muhammed,
ago.
you're great at MMA. You've got the guns. You've got the strength. You could execute a swift blow to the neck but we think you're the man for the job. We think you're the man for the job.
To stone.
To stone or to chop the hands off, or whatever the punishment. You're the man for the job. I've spoken to you enough times to think that I actually think you would run away from that job.
I think what I would say to them, look, just like Prophet Muhammad ﷺ said, yeah? I say, listen, forget about me carrying out the punishment. Let's look at your books, what the books say. if they were a Jew, I'd bring out the Torah and say, okay, here you have it already. The punishment is there. Say, look, Jews, why are you coming to us Muslims, right? Go and carry out the punishment yourself.
No, but it's a Muslim that's done it. It's a Muslim
no,
that's
but
committed sin.
No, that punishment is in the Bible, you know?
No.
All right, so the point I'm making to you is, look, if you look at it from my perspective, throwing a stone, okay? Why were they throwing stones at that time? Because think about it, right? Be a historian. You've done some historical research. Bring yourself 1,000 years ago, right? What did they have? They didn't have technology. Didn't have injections. Didn't have electric chairs. They literally had
They could just chop the head off and be done.
No, they did that as well.
It's much easier.
Why did they throw them off the roof?
No, they didn't. That's not in the Quran.
Is that hadith?
Not in the hadith.
Where does that come from? The throwing off the
Yes,
roof?
it's from an analogy. They had swords, and they had rocks, and they had bow and arrow. Okay, 3 things. You had swords. Think about it. No, seriously. You had swords, you had rocks, and you had bow and arrow. Nowadays, scholars say you don't need to. I mean, even if in a hypothetical Islamic state, if you had this thing, you don't need to use rock or something. You can use a gun, shoot the guy in the head.
Is
no
chopping the
problem.
hand of objective or consequential morality?
Consequential.
How
Consequentially
about
objective.
So
Consequentially
just because I want to get
And
these
there's no
definitions.
Now, from an Islamic perspective, once again, because remember, our moral anchorage is God, right?
Yeah.
So we say it's objective in the sense that it's true, but it can be affected by circumstances, so it's consequential.
Is homosexual relations
Yes.
objective or consequential morality?
It's objective and consequential.
Now I'm confused. I thought it was
No. It's no contradiction between consequential and objective. What I'm saying is there's a direct contradiction between absolute and consequential.
So what was the difference between objective and absolute?
So the definition of consequential is that the extraneous variables has an effect on
Consequential
it.
is the absolute and the objective.
So
I'm
the
confused. Are they
extraneous
the same?
variables have an effect on the thing.
Absolute and
Categorical and absolute are the same thing, which means it's fixed. If you look in the dictionary, what does the word absolute mean? It's something which is fixed, doesn't ever change.
Isn't that objective, or are we just using the same
No,
word for different
objective is that it's a truth claim. You're saying this is wrong, all right? But just because, or it's right, just because it's right or wrong, it doesn't mean it's not susceptible to a malleability, to a kind of change, to a kind of consequentialism. So it's conceivable to have a consequential objectivism. It's not conceivable to have a consequential absolutism. Does that make sense?
things? Okay.
So what I'm saying is, from an Islamic perspective, you'll find that listen to this carefully.
So anything in the Quran absolute?
Only the Aqidah, everything in the Quran, the Aqidah meaning the creed, yeah? There's no situation in which that would be different. So believing in one God, the angels and so on. As for the laws, they are objective morality, but they're consequential. That's why they're had been susceptible to naskh or abrogation.
Okay,
right?
so there's nothing absolute. So other than the oneness
No,
of God.
no. All of the articles of faith are absolute.
So just so I understand, what are the articles
So,
of faith?
for example, and tu'min billah, to believe in Allah, wa malaikatihi, and His angels, wa kutubihi wa rusuli, and His books and His messengers, wal yawm al-akhir, and the last day, wal qadr, and destination. These things and more, and things which are connected to those 6. So these 6 are the usul, and then you have the furu'a. But all of that is a creed, what you
so
believe.
that you can then say today that eating bacon
Yes.
is consequentially
Objectively.
moral.
Yeah. It depends on
You
circumstances.
can say
the
that.
Quran says that.
So to that point,
Yeah.
why do no Muslims
Yeah.
go around eating bacon? Why is it that
Because-
Muslims? Can I just finish my?
Yes, of
why
course.
do Muslims? So, for instance, we're arguing now about slavery. Why? Because slavery is a moral issue and question
Yeah.
on all the
Just
Abrahamic
like
faith.
everything is.
But bacon isn't. Eating bacon doesn't really offend anyone.
But you're using a liberal lens here by talking about offence, because that's you're referring to implicitly to the harm principle. I'm not a liberal. I don't believe in liberalism. I write against it.
Yet you will go out of your way to try to separate Islam from the brutal slavery of the day. So you will paint a picture.
I'm not doing that. Let's be fair of what I'm doing. What I'm doing is showing the nuance in the discussion, just like you did that with Judaism. You said, look, it was that time and whatever, but you seem to have two kind of.
No.
You don't
So
realize.
it's not. I absolutely
Yeah,
realise that
yeah.
my text says one thing, and I'm stood here in the 21st century saying that
No,
actually I
but
have a
your
question on
reasoning,
that.
your reasoning is actually wrong, because you're saying that you are almost on the verge of I'm not even sure if you did say this, that the text is wrong.
No, I've never said the text is wrong.
I don't know, but you can look back in the video. You look at it because you find it quite
I
disturbing.
I said there are certain things. Like, as I painted you, I said, like, I think you would run away from chopping someone's hand off. There are certain mitzvot.
Every single one of us has the potential to cut someone's hand off. Every single one of us, including yourself.
Some of us more than others.
No, honestly, if someone killed your daughter or whatever, you cut her hand off, trust me, or his hand off, you'd have no problem with that. Every situation is different, every context is different. What I'm saying to you, just to end this discussion, because I know it's getting a bit long here, is that you have to be able to see the nuance in the discussion. We believe in an objective anchorage from God, which says these things are right and these things are wrong, but we actually also believe a consequentialism, which means that in certain circumstances, as the Shafi'i says, إذا ضاق الأمر اتسعت الشريعة وإذا اتسعت الشريعة ضاق الأمر. He says that if the situation becomes more constrained, the Sharia becomes more wide. But when the Sharia becomes more wide, then the situation becomes more constrained. In other words, situations, it's called usul al-fiqh. Situations determine sometimes the degree to which something can be halal, permissible, haram, impermissible.
And so I think that works to an extent. I don't think there's any jurist in Islam that would ever say that homosexual relations are halal. I don't think there's any jurist that would say eating bacon is halal. And so I think...
No, he wouldn't say like that. But in certain contexts, he would say, for example, with homosexual relations, say, look, it depends now, are you talking about a man or a woman?
A man and a man being intimate and having the act.
If they do that, every jurist would say that's haram almost in all cases, because actually you're right. In situation where even if they're forced to do it, that's seen as an ithm, because it affects someone else's, rights.
Okay, we'll make it even less. We can go to anything. We can go to so many aspects. We can go to...
However, I can conceive of a situation in which it would be halal. And that situation is if someone just embraced Islam and does know nothing about the ruling. However, some scholars say about that there's no udhr bil jahl when it comes to zina, which is the opinion I take. So which means there's no excuse for any sexual act, because it should be something which is fitri.
And I think this, and then we can sum it up, because I know you've got to go, and you've got a small window to eat tonight.
But can I ask you an honest question?
Yeah.
Have you changed your mind on certain issues today?
So what I would say, I wouldn't say I've changed my mind. I think it's better. What I would say is you've introduced me to ideas I wasn't familiar with before. I wasn't aware of. Within Islam, you have
perfect. So can we then, based on that, because at the end of the day we're trying to build bridges and whatever, yeah?
Yeah.
Can we, based on that, can we nuance the discussion? Next time you speak to a Muslim, instead of doing this thing which all these kind of apologists do and whatever, come and say, oh look, what about this hadith? Because they'll come back and say, look at this verse in the Bible. Look, what I'm saying is, if we nuance the discussion, say, okay, well actually there's a whole apparatus behind this thing, and there's a whole nuance behind it. Let's not use the decontextualized approach. Let's work together to realize that there's a lot more we can agree on.
I absolutely agree. There's more we agree on, and I would, for the camera, say the overwhelming majority of Muslims I meet here are good people. They don't want to chop people's hands off. They don't want to. I actually believe fundamentally, almost everyone I speak to
it's not that they don't want to. It's that they're not allowed to.
In this country.
Yeah, they're not allowed
but
to.
in other countries,
they wouldn't be allowed to in other countries.
Okay, but they would support the Sharia.
Muslims don't want to chop people's hands off. But not only that, they're not permitted to in any context. You can't just grab someone's hand in Egypt. When some guy was stealing our stuff downstairs in Alexandria. They were running after him. I thought I was a young kid and I was introduced to this Western ideas because I went to Egypt when I was younger. Wallahi, I thought they were going to actually chop his hand off. So I was running with them to see because I was waiting to see that kind of thing happen. And I realized, what are you going to do? Oh,
maybe I take it back. Maybe you would want to chop the hand off if you're running after these guys.
Honestly, it happens. I'm not saying that, but it's not a vigilante.
I imagine you thought it was horrible to watch, yeah?
I was so scared.
Yeah, look, and because people are inherently good, irrespective of what
you have to look at the blood. You have to look beyond the blood, okay? With those things, it's not the knife of the butcher, but the lancet of the surgeon. Sometimes blood, there's some kind of wisdom behind it. Just don't think when you're looking at, for example, a child, you take him to the dentist, you know, take the tooth out, say, oh, I'm bleeding, and this and that, and I don't know why this is happening, I don't like the blood. There's no logical principle that says cutting the hand off or killing someone by a death penalty is wrong.
I mean, you can use that for anything, though. You could use that for the Holocaust. You could use.
No, you can't use that for the Holocaust.
It's a separate argument. My main thing. So you asked me, have I taken anything from this conversation, or have I learned anything new? And there were things you introduced me to, things I wasn't familiar with. What I would say to you, or my question to you, is, do you ever? So I stand here, in many of the Christian apologists and the counter-jihadis and all of it will come and they'll quote various hadith lines from the Quran. Do you ever, or have you ever, like, taken your religious hat off and questioned? So you asked me what I thought of slavery, and I said that slavery is objectively, absolutely immoral. Then and now, and I say that absolutely because I've been conditioned by the generation I grew up with. I accept that, but I believe it is immoral to take possession of another person. And
if I was an atheist, I would be a nihilist that believes in subjective morality, that does not believe that you can, number one, ascertain objective morality, know it in the first place. That would be my position as an atheist. And the reason why, which is the postmodern position of Nietzsche or Bertrand Russell and others, is because all of the mechanisms that have been tried in order to find out what objective morality is have failed miserably. And some of them, like the closest ones you can get to it, which is categorical imperatives, for example, those ones are not themselves, the mechanism is not objective by any standard. So from that perspective, I would say to you, if I were to take myself out of tradition, I would believe that there's no purpose of existence, there's no objective morality, and and that will be it.
And so, but follow what I was going to say is, are there any verses that the Christians, the EDL, whomever it may be, come to you and you actually struggle with? Because I'm quite open. Slavery is problematic for me. I would accept there are things in the Torah which
struggle with. I mean, the thing is about this country is it's only a difficulty because of the context. It's not a difficulty for me like the reason why alhamdulillah from God's guidance I feel very strong in my faith is because I've studied quite a lot in philosophy, moral philosophy, political philosophy, and so on. And so when someone speaks to me and they use human rights discourse, for example, or liberal discourse, I can see the presuppositions, the assumptions, the axioms. I can see all. Well, I can't see the axiom, but I can see all those things, and I realize what point of view they're coming from, and I can see the problems in what they're saying. However, I would say to you in terms of struggle, it's all of those things which relate to the popular ideology of the day, to be honest with you, because to convince a feminist of Islam, you have to go through a whole process of showing her how feminism is not actually, necessarily second wave feminism is not true. Or to convince a liberal of Islam, you have to explain to them how actually their own ideologies allow for what they would say are abuses of human rights.
So give me one example from the Quran or the Hadith that you struggle with.
Well, I mean, the thing is,
why don't you start with one thing that you don't agree with in the Bible?
I've already done that.
Saying struggle to explain.
No, struggle to explain. Struggle from a moral perspective.
Nothing at all.
So that's my thing. So you go through all this feminist literature, you go through all this liberal literature, you go through all this Jewish literature, all this Christian literature, all this scientific literature.
That's because of one reason.
You don't struggle with anything.
You don't need to be jealous of my faith. You can have it.
No, I mean,
honestly, you can. No. You don't need to be jealous of the faith of Islam. You can have it. I'm offering it to you free of charge. The reason why is because of the following. If you believe in an all-knowing, all-wise creator, then how can this, and you're convinced that the authority of this creator is in your book, then how can this creator conceivably be wrong about morality?
There's no such thing as consequential morality then.
No, but those...
No, stop.
Go ahead.
There's no such thing. If you're saying that if you have absolute faith in your creator, then consequential morality shouldn't exist.
No, but that comes from the creator.
It's a very clever way of running away from the statement.
No, wallahi, it does. It comes from the creator. Usulis, or the people of jurisprudence, what do they do?
Then by that definition, Allah doesn't have faith in His own.
No, it doesn't work like this, man. Allah, listen to me. Allah's Sharia has an inbuilt flexibility. Allah knew that there's going to be people in different places and times. He didn't give you a rock to deal with. He gave you elastic bands. Some people, like liberal Muslims, progressive Muslims, have snapped the elastic bands. And some people don't want to use them at all. I want to present a rock to you. These are the two extremes of the Muslim community. Some Muslims are like, literally, you will not change their mind. They will be, like you said, literalists. Zahiris, for example. You know, Zahiris, they're literalists. They'll look at the verse and they'll say, no, we're not going to apply any analogical reasoning to this at all. Some Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah, the four schools of thought, are not like that.
Surely a perfect instruction would be perfect in all time.
Well, no, it doesn't work like that, because that would be assuming that the variables are always going to remain the same. We're not assuming that the variables are always going to remain the same. The variables, since the variables are subject to change, the law has to be chameleon-like as well. It has to be subject to that change. Otherwise, the law is insufficient in dealing with more than multiple scenarios. Do you agree with me?
Unless it was a perfect instruction.
No, but that is the perfect instruction. The instruction is telling you to change. The perfect
instruction is don't eat bacon. You said that was objectively, like, bacon is always bad.
No, I didn't say this. That's absolutely bad. Objective means it's wrong, right?
Okay, wrong, sorry. What's the difference between wrong and bad?
No, bad is fine. You can use that word. It's not always, though. There are conceivable times and places where bacon can be okay.
I would imagine you're going to say in a life-threatening situation.
Yes,
when
in a life-threatening. That's what the Quran says.
That's what the Torah says as well.
Right, so they have it. So we agree then. Why are we doing this to each other? Why are we doing this to each other? Why? Jews and Muslims don't have to do this. We've got Trinitarians talking about three in one.
I'm not going to bash Christians. I like Christians.
Oh, come on. You talk to Muslims. You have to be
That's
consistent.
exactly what Rabbi last Sunday was saying
Rabbi
to everybody.
Yeah.
Exactly this.
Yeah.
This your
So the Jewish tradition, Trinitarianism is an issue. I'm not pretending it isn't. But
I think to be honest, I would have less issue believing Torah, yes, than you. Because actually,
that's right.
No, do you know why? Because frankly, even the way you have it now, the corrupted version, I don't see that there's any moral issues there. I don't. By the way, you'll never see me in polemics say, look how morally thing is that. I only say, if this is a problem for you, then this is a problem in the thing.
I understand what you're saying.
No. So if God said this thing, whatever this thing is, it's true. That's it. That's the best morality you're going to get.
And so that's the point. That's why in any context, you believe.
Yeah, but we believe in that inbuilt flexibility as well. Yes,
it's like a little get out of jail card.
It's from the
in all time, the Quran, I have complete iman, I have complete faith in the Creator.
Ash-Shatibi, he wrote a book called Al-Muwafaqat.
When's Ash-Shatibi from?
He's about 800 years ago, I think.
Okay.
Yeah? So he's one of the biggest Usuli scholars in history. He said that the most important Sharia elements are those what we call maqasid of Sharia, the objectives of Sharia. And some scholars say there's 5. Just to quickly summarize, Hifdul Mal, Hifdul Deen, so protection of your religion, protection of your lineage, protection of your monies, protection of your dignity, and protection of did I say Mel already?
Protection of your land, he says.
Mel.
Land,
lineage, Nasab.
Are you gonna leave at 8 or are you staying?
I'm gonna go now. Yeah, so these are the kuliyat al-khams, or the daruriyat al-khams. The 5, some say 6 as well. These are the 5.
My closing points, I think, is gone. My closing points.
So they're more important. They're more important than any individual thing, he says. So long as something that complies to those 5 things, it's more important than having, just.
So to that point, in any caliphate, not when you're living in another person's land, but when you're living under a khilafah,
I'm British, so I'm...
No, but when you're living under Islamic law, is there any caliphate that can say, actually, eating bacon is cool, guys?
In certain more cases, consequentially...
No, like literally as a law of the land.
No, absolutely.
And so that was the point I was trying to get to. Yes, you can find edge cases in Judaism where, for instance, if your life is threatened, you can eat bacon. So the problem with that is that's not when you describe slavery.
I'm sure lots of Jews
when you describe slavery, though, you describe it as if we're not talking as if we're living under the caliphate, under Sharia, under Islamic law. It's like here, slavery is problematic because we live in the West. We live in a liberal democracy. So my question is... It's
to do with the fact that it's out of operation. And now bringing it back in would be to go back when we were talking about objective Sharia.
But if someone did, you couldn't say it's immoral, could you? If for instance,
If you
a
took that
caliphate
view-
emerged in the Middle East tomorrow,
Yes,
and they legislated that actually, for us, we're going to institute slavery. How? They go to war with a neighbouring state, they acquire some slaves. You would take the position, actually I'm not going to say, could you take the position that they are immoral and going against Islam?
I can say that they're going against Islam. I can take that position, but saying that they're immoral, if they're acting according to their own idea, I don't think
And
anyone
not just
can,
their own idea, they're acting according to the Quran and
I
Sunnah.
don't think anyone can, and my position is, I don't think any human being can say that. Not only just Muslims, I don't think any human beings can say that. Because you'd have to first ascertain that that's an objective morality. But anyway, it's been a pleasure talking to you. I think we have done.
No, it's better than usual.
Right, no, we need to do more of this, all right? Which is, instead of scoring points, there's a lot I can learn from you, and maybe the same, maybe. So if we engage in this way, I think people will see that, Jewish and Muslim relations can improve in this country.
Inshallah. Ramadan Kareem.
Allah is a statute. He has no spirit. Allah has no spirit whatsoever. My friend, Allah has no spirit whatsoever. Come take over everything from your belly.
Come, man, say it straight. Man, don't listen to BBC. Man, don't listen to ITV.
They blame everything. They blame things on racial. They say we're losing our identity because we're letting all these Muslims in. Oh, they have no problem though with the fact that Britain, 85% of Britain's film industry is basically, 85% of the films shown in Britain are American. There's no protection to protect the native British film industry here. They have no issue with America having all its air bases in Britain. They've got no issue with that sovereignty. It's only when brown people are doing it. That's the problem. It's highly racialized. It's highly racialized. I'm saying this to content of everything. We right-wingers care far more about